Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Industry. What industry, you say? The Industry, the video series where we're going to discuss the job market, give career guidance, and market intel, and everything in between. My name is Zach Plotkin, joined by my co-host Sanjeev Menon from Madison-Davis, and today we are going to be speaking with Melissa Strait. Hello, Melissa. How are you?
Hi, Sanjeev. Hi, Zach. Great to be here.
So good to have you on. So everyone, if you don't know who Melissa Strait is, she is a friend and a family of Zach and Madison-Davis and Sanjeev, and we're so glad to have her on. But she's also our go-to person when it comes to anything fintech and crypto. Former Square exec, former Stripe exec, and former chief compliance officer of Coinbase. Thank you for being on.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? That's my brief intro of you, but would you mind giving the audience your background and a quick intro?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'll try and do the TLDR version and we can dig into any specific points you want. But basically for the past, 13 or so years, I've been working in high growth fintechs. You mentioned Square, now Block, Stripe, and most recently Coinbase, where I was the chief compliance officer for about 4.5 years. I think what kind of first got me into the fintech space was really the opportunity to kind of democratize the financial services industry. I mean, back in 2013, when I joined Square, it was almost impossible for a small business to get a card processing terminal. I mean, it was the paperwork, the bureaucracy, going through the merchant services divisions at these various banks was really, really cumbersome and really just not something that was accessible to a lot of small businesses. And so it was really exciting to think about, how, Square was kind of, changing the tune on that. Obviously, there's a lot of companies now doing that, but that was kind of what lured me into it, and I think has been the through line in my career in terms of Stripe offering kind of a more online version of that same kind of payments ecosystem, and then obviously into the crypto space. But before I got into tech, I was doing corporate due diligence for about 7 years at Kroll, and I graduated many years ago now with a degree in international relations and Spanish, so I was in DC for quite a bit of time as well.
How did they find you to bring you into this space from Kroll, or were you working with them?
I wasn't. It was actually, frankly, a bit of a right place, right time. I had moved to San Francisco kind of for personal reasons in the summer of 2012, and was working remotely, which at the time, 2012 was like kind of not a thing. I was working East Coast hours. I live here in California, so as you can imagine, that ended up being a little bit grueling. And I started looking for other opportunities, and actually just cold applied to a job on the Square website, which seems again like so fortuitous. But doing corporate due diligence, I had a lot of experience on kind of doing EDD and KYC reviews in a pretty in-depth way, really, using open source research, like being pretty scrappy. And I think that was something that Square was really interested in at the time, as they were, in the very early days of building out their compliance program. I think I was like the 5th or 7th person or something like that on the compliance team.
To back up a little bit, so you went to American University in DC, right?
I did, yeah.
Are you originally from Colorado, or is it?
Colorado. I'm from southwestern Colorado. Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to school in DC, and I didn't even know this. You did an internship at the State Department.
Yes, my wayward youth. Yeah, I actually thought that
all of our youths are wayward. Yes. Yeah.
Could have been worse. I really thought I was going to go into the Foreign Service. And I actually took the Foreign Service exam, as most, many people with an international relations degree do, and actually did pass it.
Fluency in Spanish?
Yeah, well, I did. I was fluent in Spanish. I would not say that this time. I can get by, but not really anymore. But yeah, I took the Foreign Service exam, actually kind of went through that whole process, got an offer, actually, but this was like 2007 or so. So it was really kind of peak Iraq-Afghanistan conflict. At that time, the State Department, I think, had policies in place around FSOs doing tours in those places. And that area of the world was just not my interest area. I was much more interested in kind of Spanish-speaking world. And so ultimately decided not to do that. But yeah, the internship at the State Department in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, specifically looking at the Western Hemisphere. Super interesting, super fun. My life would have, I think, been very different had I kind of stayed the course on that. But there's always a path not taken, and I think for me, that's the path not taken.
I'm going to speak for Zach here. The path to the job that we have now, or the career that we have now, was a very happy accident, not on purpose, right?
That is 100% true for me. Yeah.
How did you? So your internship was at the State Department, and then you ended up at Kroll for 6-7 years, right?
Yeah. It was actually, if you look at my LinkedIn, it says Kroll, but I actually started a smaller company that over the years and through a series of mergers and acquisitions became Kroll. There was a private equity company that snapped up a number of kind of due diligence companies in the space, so including the one I worked for, including Kroll, and so now it's all kind of within the Kroll family and Kroll umbrella. But yeah, I was doing corporate due diligence. So I started off as a researcher. That was where my Spanish came in handy. I was doing a lot of research on Latin American companies and executives, mostly for investment banks, as well as, law firms, et cetera. So whenever they were doing diligence on various deals that they were evaluating, and kind of rose up the ranks doing that. So started managing people, and ended as a director at Kroll. So then I moved to San Francisco, again, was working remotely and was kind of ready for the next chapter of my career. So yeah, that's when I took the risk and got into fintech. And it was certainly not without some trepidation. So I actually remember crying in the bathroom at Square, probably within my first couple of months on the job, because it was just such a different environment, a lot of new technology, just very different pace than I was used to. And, I took a step down, right? I was a director at Kroll, so mid-level, and took a step down and took a pay cut to come to Square. And I remember being in the bathroom and being like, what have I done to my career? Did I make the right choice? Am I getting this? I just don't know. And obviously, dried my tears, went out, and the rest is history. So that was a good lesson. It's sometimes you have to take the risk. It's not always clear on the payoff. And obviously sometimes it doesn't work out, but I think kind of, powering through in my case ended up really being a game changer.
What did you see to make the move over to Stripe? What did you see between Square? Why it was time?
Yeah, look, I loved working at Square, and I describe it as one of these, and I'm sure, everyone kind of has, you're very lucky. I think you're lucky if you have one, is these lightning in a bottle moments where it was, right place, kind of right time, right people. It was, again, kind of 2013, 2014. So fintech was very, very nascent. I mean, as you guys remember, we would go to conferences like ACAMS, and there would be a whole presentation on what is fintech. And, very, very, very junior industry. But it was also kind of a lot of peak tech heyday when, Google and Facebook and all these companies were throwing these crazy parties, and it was just kind of being in that vortex and that culture at the time. And then, everyone was young, no one had kids.
Especially in San Francisco.
This was in San Francisco, yeah. No one was married, so it was kind of a work hard, play hard type of environment, but met amazing people, lifelong friends. So it was a really hard decision to leave, but ultimately, Stripe approached me about the U.S. compliance officer role, so it was a step up from what I was doing at Square. And I certainly think if I would have stayed at Square, there would have been advancement opportunities, but you just never know. And so it just felt like, even though I was really sad to leave Square, it just felt like kind of the right opportunity, the chance for me to build the program, to really kind of from scratch, put my own stamp on it. And again, a very similar mission and a very similar culture to Square in terms of democratizing the tech stack, making it easier for companies to accept payments online. And obviously Square is an incredible company, or Stripe and Square, both incredible companies, but Stripe kind of has continued to evolve its product stack over time. So
yeah, going back to the falling ass backwards into recruiting like Zach and I did at Kroll, were you always in the, I know you did corporate investigations, which is not AML or OFAC. How did you get into the AML and OFAC and compliance space at Kroll?
Yeah, so the clients that I was working for at Kroll, as I mentioned, were kind of investment banks, et cetera. A lot of this is like pre-financial crisis too. So, when you had kind of like that whole investment banking like empire that's like a little bit different than we have it today, but was working with the compliance teams at those banks. And so those folks were generally seated within AML departments. So you could it was basically like kind of extreme EDD that they were doing on these various targets. So that's actually how I was kind of even generally introduced to the concept of compliance. I had never heard of it. It wasn't something that I, in college was like, oh, BSA, AML. I literally had no idea. But working in that space exposed me to the fact that this exists as a job, and made a lot of kind of contacts in the banking world that were doing that type of work. And so then I think when I started looking for opportunities in San Francisco after I had moved, I knew that it would be a kind of compliant in the compliance world, whether that was a kind of KYC, enhanced due diligence type program. And those are the types of roles that I started targeting. I actually don't even remember what the job was I applied for at Square at the time. It was probably like a compliance associate or something like that, but kind of with broad remit across like, I'm sure there was like KYC or EDD language in the job posting, which is I think what kind of like got me in the door there, is because I had a lot of knowledge on how to conduct those types of reviews.
And then I guess the next thing that we have to go to is, how did you get to Coinbase? How did you make that move?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like always like your famous last words, So I was at Stripe for just about 5 years, and I was really tired and ready to maybe just take a little bit of a break. And because, when I started at Stripe, I thought, okay, I think I've got one more startup like left in me. This is after my time at Square. And so then Coinbase reached out about the CCO gig. And I was like, maybe I have one more left in me. So, never say never. But yeah, they reached out about the chief compliance officer role. So again, it was kind of,
and this is what, 20?
This is late 2020. Yeah, so I started in Coinbase in February 2021. And yeah, I mean, I think first of all, the remit of the CCO at Coinbase is broader than AML. It's across a lot of different aspects of their compliance program, thinking about kind of market surveillance. Coinbase has a lot of regulated businesses now in the kind of commodities and trading space. So, and obviously that was kind of built out over time. I will say, though, that AML kind of is and will probably always be the majority of the work and the majority of, we can talk about kind of market structure legislation and where that's going, but at least under the current regulatory framework, I'd say where the regulators are really focused. So, yeah, it was a really exciting opportunity. The team at Coinbase at the time was probably about 60 people plus, contractors and consultants and things like that. But it was really a kind of program transformation moment where, the company had grown really fast and was really looking for someone to come in and help to rectify historical issues, as well as to think about how to kind of pull it forward and use technology and really put in place kind of a best-in-class compliance program. So it was a crazy and grueling interview process, but so rewarding. And I am so grateful to Coinbase and the Coinbase executive team for giving me that opportunity. But yeah, it was really awesome. And I think, again, was excited about how crypto is thinking about kind of disruption in the financial services space where people aren't being served, and how compliance historically has maybe not made it so easy for institutions to innovate or to offer products and services to new customer segments. So I think kind of all of that and looking at the opportunity at Coinbase was really, really exciting.
Yeah, so it seems like the job that he took on, I see sometimes a CCO is a CCO is a CCO, but the CCO job you took on, or at least the CCO that Coinbase needed at the time they hired you, very important time for the company. You used the word transformation, I believe, with a capital T in this particular instance. I'm going to put you on the spot. This is where you get to humbly brag. Why do you think they picked you for this transformation?
Yeah, very great, really good question. And it was interesting because I did not have any, and obviously we've just walked through my background. I had never worked at a bank, right? I'd never worked in traditional financial services. And the prior CCO, that was his background. I think that was a background of a lot of the team members there. And frankly, I think there was quite a bit of skepticism when I was hired because people was like, who is this woman? She's only ever worked at these like little fintechs out in California. But I think what they were really interested in was my ability to work within a tech company. It's very different, I think, than being at a bank. Sure, the rules and regulations are a lot the same, but the way that you interact with product, the way that you interact with engineering teams, it's different. The way that I think people kind of expect compliance to show up. You have the whole meme, which I think is like largely not true, but that compliance is kind of the department of no, right? It's where you go for someone to tell you that you can't do that. And that just doesn't fly in tech. I mean, it's an environment where engineers and product people are extremely empowered. And I mean, if you look at just kind of the general industry and the disruptions that have happened, like if Uber had been like, well, I don't know, all the rules say that we can't offer this, rideshare service. Like, I mean, the world looks very different because of Uber, because of Airbnb, because they've really pushed the boundaries on some of these things. Obviously that was not without risk, that was not without friction, that was not without litigation and regulatory actions and things like that. But I think knowing how to be a compliance professional within that environment just looks a little bit different. And I think that's why they were willing. That's what they wanted at the time. But it was actually the team that I had, some of whom I hired, some of whom I inherited, was a really great balance, right? Because I could bring kind of the tech thinking, understanding, how to work within the environment, how to advocate for the team. But then there were a lot of folks with just amazing and deep careers in traditional financial services that could really bring that expertise to bear. So I think you really need both, but ultimately, I think what was interesting to them about me was my experience here in Silicon Valley and working at other very high growth tech companies.
Was there anything that when you were brought on, they asked you that you thought was a little bit out of the box or different? Or, I guess I keep thinking about, like, I'm not saying that you were not right for the job. Obviously you were, but like, why did they pick you over somebody else?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, like, honestly, I think a lot of the questions were really around I think was really testing how I would work with the business and how I would work with the engineers and how I think differently about, ways to modernize like an onboarding experience or, right, that you're not necessarily kind of going to always look at what's been done before, but really thinking about how to kind of push things forward or how to create, different digital and online experiences to accomplish many of the same goals. How you can use automation, how you can use, technology. Obviously, this was kind of pre-AI conversation, and we can certainly talk more about AI. But yeah, I think that was really, the focus. And, from what I understand, I think, obviously they're going to kind of tailor the interview to, the kind of specific things that they're kind of trying to optimize for and trying to look at for you. But I think really for me, again, it was the experience that I had working in tech. Understanding that, the team was robust and was, holistic because of kind of the diversity of experiences. But I think at that time, they just really needed someone who could like navigate the organization and really resonate with the product folks and engineers.
Here's an opinion question for you. Do you think they knew what they were looking for, or do you think you wowed them enough where they're like, we got to go with her?
Maybe a little bit of both. No, I do think they knew. I think that they knew, and I think they obviously kind of knew the profile that they were looking for, but we're looking at candidates right across the spectrum. And so it's really kind of thinking about, for this moment in time, what is it that we need? What is going to be the most important thing to kind of get us from, point A to point B? So yeah, I think it was probably a little bit of both. But also like maybe looking to take a risk on something that was a little bit different than what they tried before. And profiles that they had looked at before. And, because it was, I think, a departure from some of the other folks that they'd had in the role. And look, like it's a super hard job and everyone kind of brings different skills to bear. Mine kind of happened to be in this area. Other people have different ones. So yeah, but it was an awesome opportunity.
I know we have so many things to talk about, but I don't think I'm like going sideways here. I actually think I'm staying on course, but maybe skipping a step here. But you said something to me that really resonated with me. It reminds me what so Vasilios Chrysos, we both know, executive board head, right? I consider him my AML mentor. A little teaser. Vasilios will be on the industry very, very soon. But you said something to me that it came very naturally to you. And I think this is really, really important. You seem to have this natural gravitation towards not only making sure that you stay compliant and obviously do the chief compliance officer job and keep the AML program running smoothly. You seem to have this natural inclination to make sure that the business lines are taken care of, relationship management. So getting to Vasilios told me the differentiator between a normal AML officer and a BSA officer, someone that runs a program, is how they build relationships with their business lines. Did you know that? Was that already ingrained in you before you got the job at Coinbase?
I think that is like the number one thing you learn coming from a like fintech kind of compliance background is you have to have good relationships with the product folks and the engineers. You just have to. You will not last if you cannot build those bridges and really figure out how to empower them to build compliant products and services, but in a way that's going to kind of further the business's ambitions. It's interesting because like thinking about, where you're spending when as an executive, compliance executive, most of my job at Coinbase was not like, can you come answer this technical compliance question for me? It
Right.
was like, can you have like having conversations with product leaders, having conversations with engineering leaders, with, folks within the business who want to expand into this country or that country, managing the team, thinking about how to advocate, how to get budget, how to get resources, what are the trade-offs we're making. So that is the job. It's not a kind of technical compliance job. It's like, how do you make inroads within the organization? How can you be seen as credible, as like following through, that you're not crying wolf, all the time. I think like people, one of the things that I would say about myself, I think obviously this is because I've spent a lot of time in this industry, I have a very high, what I call freak out bar. Like it takes a lot to get me really riled up about something. And I think oftentimes when you first come into, a tech job and like a compliance fintech job, and the business will come to you with like some wacky idea. I think your natural reaction is like, oh my God, that's terrible. We can't do that. Like, that's never going to work. Think about all the risks. But like, the reality is by the time people sit down, hash it out, like figure out what's going on, work with you, like probably what that initial idea is and what's going to launch are like maybe pretty different things, or it's going to launch to like a very tiny segment. So I think my inclination, and obviously, again, like this is learned over time, you don't just like come out of the womb like this, I don't think, is like take a breath, take a step back, hear them out, like before we kind of have that visceral reaction. I think that served me really well because then you build credibility with them that you are someone, you're not someone who at the, second that there's like a bit of a risk, you're going to go like running to the board or running to the executive team, that you really will kind of work with them in good faith, kind of figure out what's going on and really trying to like at the end of the day, I'm a shareholder in all of these companies, right? I want the business to be successful. I'm not there to impede growth, to like, to prevent innovation. And that's really the mindset that you have to have. That's not to say there aren't hard conversations and times when you're just like, I just don't see a way forward with this, right? Or yeah, we can do this, but we can't do that. But yeah, I mean, like you want to be.
Yeah, no, we can't do it. No, we can't do it that way, but
right.
Let's figure out a way to do it.
Totally. I mean, like, and there, of course, there's going to be natural friction. Like I would always say, like, if you're getting along with the business, like 100% of the time, like someone's not doing their job, right? Either compliance isn't or the business isn't pushing hard enough. But I think what you want is for people to always walk away from those conversations feeling like this compliance person is a really honest broker. I trust her. I can go to her with anything. I can give really candid feedback. And that goes both ways, obviously. So I think that's the job. Like that's the relationship to build. And I think people kind of succeed and fail based on that. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to save that thought because I do want to end the conversation or the last like 5-10 minutes that we have. We still have a little bit more time, but the last like 5-10 minutes talking more about, hey, how can the people that are watching become the next Melissa Strait? right? Like, or at least take the.
Do you see these wrinkles? Like, think hard, think, think hard about that.
Oh, let's not talk about
Coinbase.
wrinkles. And yeah, let's not go there because I'm going to start talking about my reading glasses that I have on right now. So anyway, I really want to talk about the technical stuff. Yes, I invest in crypto. Yes, a lot of our clients are crypto companies, stablecoin companies, companies in the crypto space in general. So we are, by we, I mean Madison-Davis, Zach, me, we're personally and from a business perspective invested in what happens from a government perspective, whether clarity was passed, but genius is still up in the air. What do you think about the general goal of these legislations for crypto to become more mainstream?
Yeah.
Personal opinion, not speaking on behalf of Coinbase. You're not a representative there anymore, but as someone that's been there at the highest echelons, what do you think about crypto going mainstream? And answer in any way you want.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this legislation, like, what do you think?
Totally. So many thoughts. Well, first of all, I think it's super exciting that Genius is now the law of the land. Obviously, there's rulemaking that has to happen in implementation period. But I mean, and I know you guys are hearing it. I'm certainly getting outreaches and hearing about like everyone is looking at a stablecoin play now because of this, because they're like,
By the way, I think I did it opposite. Genius passed, clarity is still up in the air.
correct. Yeah, that's right. So Genius, yeah. So I think Genius, like I think people are TradFi, everyone is like, oh my gosh, how can we like capitalize on this moment? I think there's like a number of interesting questions I have just, personally about, how many stablecoin issuers do they really need to be issuing US dollar backed stablecoins? I don't know. You've got some big players now. Are there going to be more? I don't know. What are the types of, products and services that, traditional financial services companies, banks are going to find really, I know like every bank is thinking about this, right? Where is their use case for stablecoins, et cetera, et cetera. So I think all that's fine and good. I think stablecoins are significantly less risky, at least from an AML perspective. You could have a conversation about, how they impact the, dollar hegemony and things like that. But that's not necessarily like my bailiwick. But from an AML perspective, I think significantly less risky. It'll be significantly easier for companies to get involved in that industry, kind of with the passage of this legislation. Clarity Act, and again, like I'm not an insider anymore, so I'm like reading the same news articles that everyone else is. I'll be very interested to see what happens. I mean, obviously the industry has done an absolute mountain of work. The sticky wicket right now continues to be, because this wasn't addressed in Genius, is whether stablecoin issuers can pay rewards, right? From what I'm reading, as of the past few days, you kind of get different. I'm not sure that there is agreement on that. I don't know that there is necessarily yet a path forward on that issue. It will be a real shame if they can't get something through this Congress, because I mean, who knows what will happen in the midterms, but it maybe is potentially unlikely that the Republicans retain control of the House of Representatives at minimum, in which case I think that the path for clarity becomes more challenging. Again, this is just like my personal opinion. I haven't like done a comprehensive poll of where different legislators are on this issue or anything. But I think particularly because of the Trump family's investment in crypto, the World Liberty Financial connections, et cetera, I think it's kind of put a sour taste in the mouth of a lot of folks, and particularly Democrats, who will be looking to kind of prevent the Trump agenda at all costs. Whether crypto gets crossed in the crossfire of that, remains to be seen. So I hope that there is a path, because it is so important. The whiplash that the industry has had, for years, it's not helpful. It's not helpful for consumers. It's not helpful for the industry. So I will remain optimistic. But you could probably look at Polymarket for what are the odds of crypto clarity passing this Congress. I don't know what it is. I haven't checked lately.
I already put my bet in. My prediction. Sorry, my prediction. Not a bet. It's not a betting. It's technically not a betting bet. No, I appreciate that. We weren't asking that question because we expect you to be the expert in that legislation, but more of I think the Genius Act passed while you were there. No, it was
Yeah, it was
probably
over the
after.
summer. Yeah. So technically it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, your opinion matters considering the seat that you sat in at Coinbase. But to segue to the last phase of this conversation, I want to focus on the AML compliance space and the hiring space now, but still staying in the crypto space before diving down deep into more of like the words of wisdom. Like, what do you think about the AML and compliance programs at crypto companies and fintechs, meaning the compliance 2.0, maybe it's 3.0 this at this point philosophy? Could you ever go to a TradFi company at this point, considering how cutting edge everything else is? Or what was it like building or maintaining or enhancing the AML compliance program at Coinbase of all places?
Yeah. I mean, I think when I first started on this fintech journey, the delta between the type of compliance program that you would see at like a small fintech and what would be at a traditional bank, I mean, it was just huge, right? And in particular, because a lot of the fintechs at the time were regulated as money transmission or money transmitters. So, that's a state by state regime. Obviously, you have states like New York, like California, that are, Texas that are more aggressive. The other states that, they're just frankly like small shops, can't oversee, things as much. So that said, I think as time has passed, that delta has gotten smaller and smaller. And at least from my experience at Coinbase and probably speaking about other large cryptocurrency firms, it's probably almost non-existent in terms of what the regulators are demanding, the standard to which companies are being, let me say, U.S. companies are being held, potentially European ones as well. I mean, have experience with that. The standards are incredibly high. I don't know that that's exactly the same on the payment side. I think payments is a little bit of a different beast, a little lower risk because you've got the KYC instruments on either end from a bank and the card processors and things like that. But for crypto, I think that the bar in terms of what you need to meet, the program that you need to have, the safeguards that you need to have in place, like it's serious. It's not like a fly-by-night program. Again, speaking kind of in the United States in particular. So, and I think it's beneficial. Like it is a pro to have a world-class compliance program. Like that is going to be a good thing for any company. Obviously, you want that program to be innovative, to be agile, to be technology enabled, like all of those important things. But you're certainly like being on the wrong side of a regulator. It's not fun for anyone. In fact, it's the opposite. It's extremely painful. It costs a lot of money. It's a huge time expenditure. I think my experience in going through the kind of regulatory ringer is that it made the program stronger. It made it better. But obviously, that is not a permanent state that you always want to find yourself in. You want to kind of come out the other side. So, in terms of whether I would work for a traditional, never say never. I think in particular with AI, everything that's happening there, like you almost have like no choice but to innovate and I actually think that there's, again, like the delta between tech and TradFi used to be very, very big. I think it's narrow. Obviously, you could look at different types of institutions. Probably like a small community bank is going to look very different than JP Morgan Chase, that has tons of money and tons of resources and things like that they can bring to bear. But yeah, I do think what has changed over the past 10 years is I think traditional financial services used to think like, we're just going to wait for this to go away. This is like a flash in the pan. And now they're like, oh shoot, we have to acquire these companies. We have to partner with these companies because our customers ultimately want the products and services. They want the ease. They want the convenience of those offerings. It's like, why would you call a taxi cab company when you could like go to the Uber app, right? Or in my case, the Waymo app here in San Francisco. So yeah, but like never say never. Life is long. There's a ton of companies across the spectrum doing really, really interesting and invigorating work. So, who knows?
Obviously, yesterday or the last couple of days was International Women's Day. We wanted to ask kind of your thoughts on being one of, I'm not going to say many, but being one of the female executives in the industry in a very male-dominated area, it seems. There are organizations like Women in Crypto that are coming up, but we obviously want to see more and more of them.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to get your opinion and curious about your experiences in it. Have you found it challenging coming up? Was it something that you didn't see that being an issue? Or you didn't see it being Like you saw a number of other women in the area in the space. I'm just kind of curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I will say me speaking for myself personally, I had a very generally good experience. A lot of extremely supportive leaders across the companies that I worked for, both men and women, who were very interested not only in like my personal success, but in the success of other women, in the success of the compliance program. That is obviously not the case for everyone, and by virtue of myself and my ethnic background, all of those things like can contribute to that. So I don't want to say like, oh no, this is not a problem in tech and everyone has a great experience. Like that is certainly not the case. I think for many people, I think I benefited from like very supportive leadership across the board. And actually, one of the things that impressed me when I interviewed with Coinbase was like the number of senior women. I mean, the CFO, the COO president, the chief of staff of the CLO at that time, like the legal team had a bunch of senior women. So it really felt like a place where, they were very interested in kind of bringing in people of different backgrounds and perspectives and things like that. And I know a lot, and you guys know, right? A lot of women, in the compliance space and the kind of tech space who've kind of come up over the years. That said, the work is never done, right? I mean, I think it's always important to, like, where can you provide a helping hand? Where can I think speaking to your audience here, I'm always happy to be on the lookout for opportunities to make intros, to things like that, because I benefited from that mentorship in my career. There was a guy, I'll give him a shout out. I don't know if he'll listen to this, but his name is Dennis Lormel, who I met when I was, you guys know Dennis, of course. Yeah. Of course we know Dennis.
Come on, I'm an 8 years old broke. Come on, we love
I always say like he was probably one of the people who was like most instrumental in getting me where I am when I was at Kroll. Like that's when I first met him. We were working at the same company, and he gave me some cool opportunities there when I moved to San Francisco, like put me in touch with some industry folks out here. So, I'm hugely grateful to a bunch of people. But I think the other thing I'll say is you got to take some risks sometimes, men or women. I think, when I went into Square, I took a pay cut and I took a title downgrade. And I think people are more willing to do that now. But sometimes you have to take those risks to make the payoff happen. Again, it doesn't always work out. But without having done that, I would not be where I am. So
I mean, it sounds like be open to taking some risk, calculated risk.
Yeah.
And networking more than anything else.
Networking, putting yourself out there. Yeah, it's the stuff that like, look, I'm like much happier to be like at my house reading a book by myself than pounding the pavement or whatever. But it is really important. Say yes to the things that are coming across your plate. If someone wants to chat to you about a role, even if it's not a role that you're particularly interested in, like have the conversation, build your network, because you just never know. I mean, so many people that you guys as a great example, it's because you like say yes to the conversation and you kind of just never know where that'll take you. And I think sometimes if you're maybe too precious about that, or like, well, I'm not interested in a new job right now, or I would never go to that tech company, it's really crazy, or it's not aligned with my risk tolerance, or it's not aligned with my values. Fine, like they're not offering you a job. They're asking to have a conversation. Have the conversation. You can always say no. I think that's actually some of the best advice that I ever got in my a million years ago.
Have the dialogue.
Yeah.
Have the dialogue. It doesn't mean you're taking the offer.
I was interviewing for a job at a big consulting firm, and one of the questions that they asked me was whether or not about travel. Like, this job is like 60% travel. Are you okay with that? And I was like, oh, I mean, I don't know. I have a boy. It was just like, in retrospect, it's like the most cringe answer that you could like ever have. It's like, just like, yeah, I'm open to that. Like, tell me more about that, right? You can always turn them down if it ends up that it's not right. You don't need to play out that whole dialogue in front of the person you're having the conversation with. So it's always good to be the one to like turn it down versus they're like, okay, she's not, fully like committed to this. So, the lessons you learn along the way.
That was going to be one of my last questions to you, which is, what was the most surprising thing you've learned throughout your career? Other than don't word vomit on an interview.
Yeah. I mean, that's hard. And I feel like, sometimes you just get caught in a weird situation. And you're just like, "Blah, like, why did I say that? Um,
Nerves. It's always nerves, right?
yeah, yeah, gosh. I'll say, I do think compliance has a reputation. Tech has a reputation, but people surprise you, right? Like there are all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of experience. And, I have worked with engineers and product folks who care so much about compliance, right? Who really want to get it right, who want to learn, who want to go get their CAMS certification, right? And so I think kind of just, don't let yourself kind of fall into like the typecasting, right? That like, I'm going to go into this meeting and I'm going to like be the new cop sheriff in town. And I'm going to like put my foot down, like let people kind of surprise you, right? I mean, same with compliance. I think, showing up and being like, oh yeah, let's have a conversation, right? I'm not giving you a yes or no answer right now. I think a lot of product folks are like very disarmed by that. So like, wait, I thought I was coming in here to like get yelled at. And I'm like, no, I don't, not yet anyway. I reserve the right.
Hey, it's been so great to have you on. I just want to make one thing very clear. Even though you're not at Coinbase, you have not left the AML community or industry.
I have not. I'm currently living my best life, but I'm still obviously plugged in, doing a lot of ACAM stuff. So hopefully if you guys are Hollywood or other folks are Hollywood.
And you're still on the ACAM executive board, right? Yeah.
I am. Yeah, I am on the advisory board. So yeah, I would love to meet folks in person. I'll see you guys at ACAMS Hollywood, ACAMS Vegas, and various other things coming up. West Coast AML Forum. I think hopefully you guys will make it out there. So
well, we're sponsoring. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's right.
We're so excited. We're
so awesome.
excited. Yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, even though you're not a Coinbase, you're still AML is still in your blood.
For better or worse, I can't shake it. I would have never thought it, but I like it.
You could leave a company, but you can't leave what you do if you really have passion for it. It's cool that you're still on the advisory board, West Coast AML Forum. You don't need to necessarily be the chief compliance officer or the head of AML of anything, right? If you build the gravitas that you built, take the risks, work your butt off, fail to succeed, and then put yourself out there, and then hope for the best.